Hi everybody, Tony Tonkin here, and I'd just like to welcome all of you, the whole one or two of you that watch me. I'd just like to welcome to Things That Matter. And what I wish to talk about today is the presidential debate. US presidential debate is the only one we seem to be interested in. And I've got a little bit of a snippet from Credlin from Sky News, which I thought was interesting and which always bears some form of criticism. So I thought I'd just offer that as as something that we can also have a discussion about, if you like. I keep saying at the beginning of each of these feeds, I realise that I'm the only person that's probably... I did meet up someone the other day. I was pretty excited, who also watches my feed. So I hope that more than one person gets a chance to have a look and to think about some of the things that we talk about here, and that you could offer some suggestions also as to things that you would like to talk about and have a conversation about. And even if you want to join in on these conversations, we have the ways by which you can do that. So if you just put a note somewhere down below and let us know if you want to join in, then I'm happy to have you contribute to these conversations as well, because our conversations are available to everybody. We're completely transparent, and we like to hear what other people have to say also about the types of things that we discuss, which is, frankly, almost anything. So one of the things, though, we're going to talk about today is the presidential debate. I don't know how many of you actually saw it or bothered even having a look, but it was a debate which was going to determine probably nothing much at all. All we knew that President Trump, all he needed to do was not butt in, not argue. And I guess it was kind of interesting that they chose to turn off his microphone he was given the instruction anyway that his microphone was going to be turned off when Biden was talking in that 2-minute area. And he complied, except for once, I think. He tried to butt in and they cut off his mic. So let's see that as progress. I find it fascinating that I don't think Trump has the intellectual capacity to understand ideas and concepts, and so he can't talk about things openly like climate change, immigration, and that sort of stuff. He always has to go back to blaming others for how this thing had impacted him, and he just there's no... I've always thought with Trump there's zero intellectual capacity, and I don't think I've actually thought about that about anybody really. But this is the man who has extreme power and authority, and not to be able to articulate how you think and feel about ideas which impact millions of people's lives, and to be able to put forward and present an argument has always astounded me. And one of the interesting things he did in this presidential debate was he was obviously told to make sure you say that you're not a politician like Joe Biden. And twice he did do that. He made the point that I'm not a politician. Well, look, if you're not a politician, what in the hell are you? You're a con man and I'm not going to insult used car salesman, so I won't say what I was thinking, but you're deceptive, you're false, you're artificial, you're everything that most of us revile around. I just think Trump's revolting, man. It was interesting. I was watching or listening to a clip on from Morning Joe, and Joe Scarborough was saying that he knows a whole host of Republicans who know that he's a terrible man. He's not the sort of person that you'd invite around to your place for a meal or you want to hang out with your kids. I can tell you that now. He is a revolting human being. But these people, for some bizarre reason, still think that he's worth voting for because he's not a politician. whatever that might mean. Well, the reality is he is a politician. The point is he puts himself up as not being a normal, whatever normal represents, politician, and therefore he is different, and consequently one feels that you should vote for him. And I don't think that necessarily that's the case. I think that you need to vote for honest, decent individuals that happen to be politicians. And we hope that, somewhere out there, and we hope that Joe Biden, for the American sake, is one of those people. But clearly this man isn't. So that creates another issue. So what we would like to do is just ask for your feedback. If you're able to watch the debate, and if you have an idea as to whether or not Joe won it or whether you think Trump won it, let us know. I don't think it mattered, quite frankly, who in the hell won it. That if anything, I thought Joe put forward better arguments than my mate Donald. So let's wait and see. Because I think that in some sense this election is probably going to be closer than what a lot of people think. How would I know that? I live so far away. But mainly because the polls have been up and down. Joe Biden seems to have had a reasonable amount of favourable polling over a long period of time. And, in the American system, which is the most unjust system you could imagine, it's dependent on the Electoral College, which is a bizarre system to say the least. And that, Joe could certainly get the popular vote, as did Hillary Clinton, and still not win this election. And I can't even fathom what that's about, even though here in Australia we know that that a party can win the popular vote but still not get the seats it requires in Parliament because of the nature of our system. But we also know that after each election there's a redistribution process which helps to change the boundaries a little bit so that becomes more equitable. And I discovered today they have a similar system in the US, but there's still a lot of gerrymandering that happens in the US because I think the state seats are far more gerrymandered than perhaps the federal seats. Not too sure how that works. But I did want to have a conversation just about something that Peter Credlin placed in Sky News, which actually made me think a little bit more about the biases that sit. Now, I know I have some biases. I know that. I've talked about them today. Don't like Trump, told you why. There are very few politicians there are very few people I don't like because their behaviour revolts me. And often that's because, there are very few people that I believe I can't, I feel like I just could not trust no matter what. I have very few clients, if any, that I feel that way about. But Trump is certainly one of them. And one of the others are some of the people I'm about to play to you. And that's just not because they're on the other side of politics. It's because I think they are in my view, they're irrational. And they're trying to support somebody that I can't understand. It's like that Joe Scarborough thing I talked about. If you see people as being disrespectful, dishonest, rude, then they're not the sort of person you should have in public office. Yet I'm about to introduce you to one of them. So let's just watch this clip and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Let's get straight into it with my panel. Corey Bernardi from Adelaide and James Morrow from Sydney. Let's have a listen to Barack Obama today.
We're not going to have a president that goes out of his way to insult anybody who doesn't support him or threaten them with jail. That's not normal presidential behavior. We wouldn't tolerate it from a high school principal. We wouldn't tolerate it from a coach. We wouldn't tolerate it from a coworker. Why would we expect and accept this from the President of the United States?
Well, Corey.
I just want to say, before we get into their criticism and Cory Bernardi's bizarre response, it was refreshing to have Obama back. Actually, I do think he's one of the great orators of our time, and that he has a sense of being able to place an argument and having you go with him as he's discussing that argument. And there's a sense that he is honest and is truthful, and is passionate about what he's talking about, and that he believes in what he's talking about. I think these are important attributes. And so when I saw him the other day and I watched the whole speech, I thought, why don't we have people like that here today that are that articulate and that can talk about the things that concern them and make us feel like we're moving with them and that we need to also support them. I don't know why we don't, but we don't. But this is what Cory Bernardi has to say.
They have to get him to inject some energy into the campaign because they're not getting it from the candidate.
Oh, that's for sure. They've wheeled him out while Joe Biden is getting, the elixir of life to get him through the debate and animate him for long enough. But, I mean, Barack Obama is one of the greatest phonies.
Isn't that exciting that Joe has the elixir of life, and for some reason this Sleepy Joe notion has come about. One thing I noticed today was that I think we need to still remember that Joe, as a child, had a trouble articulating words, and that he had a stutter, and it was quite profound. And I don't think you ever really get rid of the stutter. I think to some extent you have to sort of think carefully about how you process your words, because it's just a physiological problem. And I still think Joe encounters that from time to time, and it does make him appear a little bit slow. I need to say also that I don't think Joe is necessarily the best candidate for the presidency either. That I think they could have chosen someone different from Joe Biden. I'm not 100% supporter, but he's there, so we need to go with who we've got, I guess. But he's certainly better than Trump. But Bernardi is just, I'll let you decide for yourself.
His rhetoric there about we wouldn't tolerate it from a president comes from a president who put the IRS onto conservative organisations that were opposed to his rule, that corrupted and I use that term advisedly, the FBI, and turned it against its own citizens. He knew about Hillary Clinton's private server. He was communicating with her using an alias, and yet he denied any of this. And who can forget?
I just need to say that none of the stuff that he's talking about have been proven. And when one looks at Trump and some of the things that he says about having Bill Barr do some dirty work for him by locking up Obama and locking up Biden and locking up Hillary and locking up anybody who stands against him, and then we've got Cory Bernardi on the one hand criticising Obama and the Obama administration for stuff which was never ever proven. He's talking about IRS interviewing or having a look at or auditing some Republican donors' funds some years back. And they were doing that because there was some unscrupulous behaviour going on in relation to the donations that the Republicans were placing into their own pockets, I guess, in terms of the party. So some of that stuff, I think, is disputable. Just to bring it out now, clearly Bernardi's been holding on to this stuff for ages, and here he is with the opportunity to spout forth.
That his protege, his former chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, went on to become the Chicago mayor, and of course lawlessness ran amok, and black lives didn't matter there because there were so many black deaths under his watch. This bloke is a phony, but that's how desperate the Democrats are.
James Morrow.
What is there? I just wonder whether Cory Bernardi is racist. You know, and I know that's a terrible thing. I know we shouldn't say because someone disagrees with somebody else who just happens to be black that they are racist. And I don't know Corey Bernardi, never really met the man. I just get concerned, I guess, that Bernardi is this guy who's has some political influence in the past. He is right-wing, we know that, and he is pretty irrelevant today, apart from the fact that he's on Sky News. But his views are obviously being transmitted through this media. And it is holding firm to the views of Sky News and the right-wing media in this country, Australia, which is of concern to me. I don't mind people having different views, but when you blatantly come out against someone like Obama, who did a lot of really helpful things in the US when he was president, including turn the country around from a recession. And remembering that he wasn't able to do a lot of the things that he could have done because the Congress was, in the last 4 years, was primarily, it was Republican, and they prohibited him from doing a lot of the things that he and Biden would have liked to have done. And I really like the way today Biden said, well, look, you know, and the other thing too that I really like today, which just reminded me, is that Biden said, I like to take responsibility for the mistakes that I've made. And some of that was about his legislation in terms of incarceration of people who were using drugs. And he's now saying, I'd like to have some form of rehabilitation program set up so that that doesn't happen anymore and that it was wrong. And I think that's an interesting aspect of it's an interesting concept, is it not, that someone in politics takes responsibility, says, yeah, okay, I accept that what we did there was unhelpful, and next time I have a chance to do something similar, I won't be doing the same thing. I'll try to find a different way of doing whatever it is that I can do in order to make a difference. So so I really appreciated that in Biden, but let's hear what the other clown on the Credit Show still has to say.
The debate tomorrow, final presidential debate in Nashville. It'll be President Trump, Joe Biden. Interesting to see how he plays at this time, particularly the president. What do you think?
Well, look, I think that the rules are, once again, being stacked against the president, as they have been through all of these things. But I think Trump needs to be very careful in how he coordinates his attacks on Joe Biden.
Can we just make a point about the rules being stacked against Biden? There was nothing in the debate today that disadvantaged Trump, unless you believe that being an interrupter, being the bastard that he was at the last time, is the reason why it's being stacked against him, because he couldn't be this himself, whatever that is, which is just a rude, arrogant, out of touch individual. But on this occasion, I thought the rules played more in his favour, because he was quiet. You know, someone said on one of the shows after it that it appeared that he was more presidential than what he was in the last debate. Well, surely that plays in his favour. So what's this guy talking about? I've just got no frickin' idea.
We know Joe Biden is deeply implicated in these emails that were found on Hunter Biden's laptop. But we also know that if he starts to go after Hunter himself, Joe will play a sympathy card like we've never seen before. So he has to be very careful to focus those attacks on Joe Biden. What would you do? Are you in hot?
And he's wrong. Isn't it interesting when you play their comments after having watched the event and you see that the sympathy card he's talking about was not played at all? In fact, that stuff around Joe Biden and his son, Joe Biden just simply said, no, it's not true. And there have been many people who have also agreed that it is not true. So, it's like, I get so frustrated with Trump because he doesn't have to do it, but he cannot help himself. He has to attack all the time. He has to attack the other person, no matter who they are. You know, if they sit in an opposite position to him, he must feel that he has to go in with the jugular, and he has to criticise them. What was interesting about Biden today was that when Biden was challenged about some of those issues, he just simply said, no, that's not true, and let it go. That, because the reality is, if something isn't true, you don't have to try and justify why it's not true. You can just simply say, no, it's not true. I don't agree with you. Move on. Right? And that takes the sails out of the wind. That takes the wind out of the sails of the other person. So, go Joe. Let's see what other things this character had to say.
Why is your son doing business in China, and how did you help him out? What is the quid pro quo for you in China? And keep Hunter and all of his very lurid, bizarre personal problems out of it.
Corey, how does he play it?
See, so that was the interesting part too, was that they decided that the Trump campaign obviously thought, with this Giuliani information and all these conspiracy theories of the guy, they could level this at Biden and it would damage him. But then, as is politics in the US and anywhere else, I guess, the other side had their arguments as well. And one of those arguments was, well, buddy, you've been paying heaps of tax in a country like China and paying bugger all tax in your own country, and you had an account that no one really knew about until recently. So what have you been doing? Why are you criticising me for my son's activities, saying that I've become involved with them as well, when in actual fact, you're doing the same sort of thing? And that kind of disrupted the whole argument. It meant that you couldn't keep going down there all the time, even though Trump attempted to come back at it a few times and failed miserably, because, there has been this other issue about, and, his finances, and also, like the grifting within the Trump administration has been extraordinary. The amount of people that have tried to, like just his family, the money that they've endeavoured to make, from hiring out whole hotels to the Arab Emirates or Qatar or hiring out, or even that suggestion that he have that conference at one of his resorts, his golf clubs, is just blows me away. Like, you should not accuse someone else of grifting if you're the biggest grifter in town. If you're there to make money out of this system and you're there to inject as much money into your own pocket as you can because of the influence that you have, e.g. president, then it's a sad state of affairs, but that's the way it is. So don't point the finger at somebody else, because when you point your finger at somebody else, there are a few other fingers pointing back to you, buddy. So just be more careful. I'll just finish off this Credlin bit, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
Well, I think the president has to be very, very direct. I mean, we know the debate is stacked against him. They're not going to touch on foreign policy. So he's going to be forced to raise these issues. Have you been involved in business with your son? Will you release the travel records you had with your son? And make it very, very direct, because it's clear to anyone that really wants to examine it that Joe Biden is severely compromised. And I don't just mean that cognitively.
I love that bit. It's really, really clear. Corey, who is it clear to? It's clear to those people that want to believe that he's compromised. Even if there's no evidence to support that, it's still about, man, this is, if you want to believe this shit, then believe it. But it doesn't necessarily make it true just because you believe it. And they're so desperate, these people on the right wing, to stick the knife into whoever they can. If you're sitting on the other side of the fence to them, you're kind of like the enemy. There's no way in the world you can negotiate with these people, because they are just they see them as so corrupt. And it just frustrates me no end, because they can't see the corruption that sits on their own side of the fence. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that the other side, whoever they might be, don't have a sense of corruption, and there aren't people in that party on the Democratic side who are in it for the money, because I guarantee you there are. I'm not suggesting for a moment that there's a sense of purity and puritanical attitude towards politics. It's not the case, right? But it just amazes me that one side can just see the other side as totally wrong. One of the criticisms, in fact, I think, of the Democratic Party has been that they've been, and you get this from the extreme left in the Democratic Party, and that is that they're too soft, that they're kind of forgiving, that they don't go for the jugular like the Republicans do, and they're kind of polite, and that they're more open for negotiating a stance than not. But then, interesting enough, when they get to a point where they have to negotiate, for example, over the relief bills and the other sort of stuff, the $1 trillion that they're trying to get passed through Congress, and they're being tough because they're standing their ground because they're not getting what they want, they're considered obstructionists. So I guess they just can't win. Whichever side of this spectrum you want to have a look at, they just can't seem to get it together. So what can I say? Except there is still a bit more to go, I think.
History, his track record is compromised, and I suspect that's why Barack Obama didn't endorse him early in the primaries, and it hasn't come out and supported him widely until today in respect to the campaign. It's desperate measures and very high stakes. But I actually think the president, Donald Trump, is going to win this election quite easily in the end.
Yeah, James, I know you're about to head off to the States. I'm interested in the polling. I mean, I'm so reluctant to back in.
I want to know how Corey believes. I don't believe that it's going to be. It's not a fait accompli. I don't think you can say that one side is necessarily going to win over another. I think it'll be an interesting election, to say the least, because we don't know what Trump's going to do if he loses. But it will be. It'll be a fascinating election, I think, depending on how many people actually turn out to vote. Unlike here in Australia, where it's compulsory voting, in the US, obviously it's not. So it's about enthusiasm, it's about who's going to turn out, it's about getting your volunteers out there, knocking on doors and enrolling people to vote, and all that sort of stuff goes on over there. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of hard work. Thank God we don't have to do that here in Australia. It's far easier, I think. It's about, because, you use up a lot of energy trying to get your message across if you're just out there trying to get people to sign a piece of paper to say that they're enrolling, and then get them along on the day to a polling booth, or to get them to fit out a form to send in early voting form or whatever. So a lot of energy has to go into all of that, and a lot of money in order to get people to vote. And I think it's a shame, because clearly that money could be used elsewhere, particularly on social issues. Need I say any more? And one of these guys is going to go over there, and let's hope he stays.
Published poll, particularly in a market like the US, where you've still got to drag out the vote. It's not compulsory voting, but how do you see the polling? How do you judge
I just don't think so, Peter. I just don't think that the nationwide polling means a heck of a lot. It's a country of 330 million people. It's huge. A lot of people have already voted already. But what's really interesting, I spent the morning the other day diving through the state polls, some of those swing state polls where Trump needs to win. And what happens is, right now, he is actually closer to Joe Biden than he was to Hillary Clinton in those states, which he won back in 2016. So I really think there is a momentum behind him, which you see when you start to dial into the more granular polls.
Actually, I tend to agree with that analysis. Fancy agreeing with him, but at the end of the day, the polls have been slipping backwards and forwards, and no one really knows, and no one will know until the final vote. But I'm hoping that the American people get the person they deserve, because they do not deserve this clown. That is for sure. So, look, there's been a number of people that have logged in today. I really do appreciate it. Please remember that that this is about me hopefully doing one of these a day, which I don't do. It's about sharing ideas and having a conversation with everybody. And it's about you contributing back as well to let me know what you think. And I really do appreciate that. So particularly in COVID times, I just want to say be safe and look forward to catching up with you next time. Take care. Bye.